Hi, I'm Michelle Olivier, and you're listening to Hey, I Want Your Job, the podcast that looks at amazing jobs and what it takes to get them. Welcome to Hey, I Want Your Job. And today I have Kirsten, who I just found out I'm a little bit of a fangirl of her and have a lot of envy about mutual love and respect for other people in her space, which we will talk about later. But right now, let's talk about you. Kirsten, what's your job title?
Yeah, I like to go by CEO, right? Like just own it, run my own business. I'm like, I'm a CEO. That's it. Some people are like, okay, but really, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a consultant.
That is my next question. So
yeah.
That's what I totally do. So what are you the CEO of?
Yeah, I'm the CEO of Kirsten Lee Hill Consulting. I do consulting. I'm a researcher. So I specifically consult people with, they're like, I have no idea if this thing works. Like, how can I figure out if this is a good idea or trash? Like, I want to survey people and learn how they feel about all these things. Someone help me.
Oh, Kirsten. I'm just going to go straight in with the deep love and admiration because I hate bad data. I really hate made up data. I can't even tell you, there's so many, especially in HR recruitment, it's exceedingly difficult to quantify because there's so many divergent processes. It's just, everything is self-reported. It's like the worst set of like that and nutrition, right? Like you just almost impossible to quantify. And yet there are like a bevy of statistics that get batted around that I really think that some guy just made up one day and then everybody else repeated it. Like this whole recruiters look at your resume for an average of 10 seconds. I want to see the data on that.
Me too.
I have heard that my entire professional life. And I have never seen the data set from which that comes. I have taught that statistic. And I use it because it's handy and everybody knows it. And it is true that it's not a lot of time, but it just a little bit gets my goat every single time that it's just bad data. So who are you out correcting bad data for? Like, who are you doing these things for? What areas, etc.?
Yeah. So I like to specifically work in like the do-gooder space where it's like anyone who's trying to make the world better. Like some people want to overhaul education. Some people are doing criminal justice. I've done a few things in the environment, which is like a totally different field, but like, hey, if you want to make it better, like let's do it. But I work at like two opposite sides of the spectrum. I'll help like one of the biggest projects I'm working on right now is for the Gates Foundation. Like Gates are heavy hitters in the world of research, data, changing things, right?
And so, like, the do-gooder world, in fact.
Do-gooder, yeah.
Very big in the do-gooder world.
Yes, so I do work with them, but I also do work with like the people they might fund or like the people who would hope to get their funding, where it's like, I just started and I have this project and I'd really like to get money, but people aren't going to give me money unless they trust me and know that this thing actually works. So like, how can I do that? So I feel like I have like the little people who are like just getting started, and then like these big behemoth organizations that are not just getting started, but are starting to think like, hey, we should be more responsible with our money. Like, let's not just give people millions of dollars for stuff that we don't know works, right? Or give you $1 million and not follow up later to see what happened.
So I think that I want to kind of go and follow that business track for a beat, because I think that is super important. So much of what we see out there that is junk data, or just that's not just blatantly made up. I'm on all of the sites that are like, hey, get an expert to give you a quote about blah. And I mean, it's all just something I made up one time, right? Like, let's be honest. And it is for everybody that's on those sites. So, but they're cheap. They're really cheap to get an expert to tell you that. Real data science is not cheap because you like to eat. You have a cute dog who also likes to eat. So talk to me about cost. Like, how much does it cost to do responsible research in a business situation?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things to talk about is like right sizing research. Because to your point, research is very expensive. Like when I was working more in academic side of things, it was like $200,000 was a small grant. 200,000 to do research was small. It was like, I'm not like batting an eye for something under a mill, right? Like that's a whole different scale. Like you need a million, multiple millions to do like big, really rigorous studies. But I think the mistake people make is it's like, well, I don't have that kind of money, so I can do this like trash data. And like, I don't think that's true. It's like, you just need to like really zoom in on what you want to learn, because you could get some good data for like $5,000, you know? Or like, if you're willing to like, if you wanted to invest your time and learn all the things yourself and not hire someone, like you could theoretically do it for like free if you want to do it yourself, but you can do things on a smaller scale. But it's definitely not like, I don't know, it's not like you can pay someone like $45 to make you a magic survey that's going to be quality data collection.
Well, and yet almost every HR professional in the country would argue with you, because they do that every freaking year with the salary data. And most of those salary surveys at $50 is right about the price point, between 50 and like a couple $100. And they send you the survey, and then you fill in your survey, and everybody fills it in and self-reports. And you're just like, and they swear by it. Like, companies make choices about people's lives and livelihoods based on it. And they do not understand at a fundamental level that what they have is crap. Like, they really think they have paid for a valuable service. So can I get you on that example to just break it down, why that's a piece of shit and what something that was meaningful might actually look like, just so that people can kind of understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, I think that the baseline is that people go to school, like people like me go to school for many, many years to learn how to do good data collection, right? So it's like, there's a difference between me going to school for six bonus years and like running studies and practicing how to write surveys, and someone who just like woke up and was like, I'm going to write a survey today, and they go to their desk and they make a survey, because there are actually like techniques and like principles you should be applying. And I like to tell people, like, when we designed this last round of surveys for the study I'm running, it took like 6 months to get a good survey. 6 months. Like, that's a long time. If someone's like, we did this in like a day or a week, I'm like, instantly, no. Like, I just can't. And the true test, I really think, and I think this for like every survey I've ever seen, is if you have a survey you think is really good, sit down with someone that you would like to take that survey and have them take it out loud and like listen to their thought process as they're answering the questions. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not understanding what you're asking them, and they're not answering in a way that's actually useful to you. So now you have all this data that it's completely inaccurate, right? Because it's like, oh, I thought when you said how much money I made, I should be thinking about like this and this, and I added in this value, or I took off this. And it's just like, oh my God, nobody's even thinking about the same thing. Like, how is that helpful?
Well, I think that's a great point, because even in HR, right, we bandy around words like pay and remuneration. And in general, people would say, well, pay is how much you actually get in your paycheck, and remuneration is the value of all the bells and all the whistles. The problem is, what you count in bells and whistles varies wildly between organization. So some organizations are like, hey, we have a free parking facility in downtown San Francisco. That obviously means that that's an extra $30,000 a year in your total remuneration package. No, friend, it's not. Whereas somebody else is like, we don't have anything. I mean, all of our employees get 30 days a year of vacation, but that's just not being a dick, right? So it's just like, there's so much variation and all of that. And I think that that's a great example of exactly what you're trying to say there, that like, we use words that make perfect sense in our head, And we think that we are being totally and completely clear in our head with the use of those words. And then somebody else hears and sees those words and they come up with something totally and completely different. And I know I struggle with the fact that I'm just like, well, then those people are obviously wrong and dumb. And that's not true. Like, I'm sorry, do you not speak English? But I have that knee-jerk response, and then I have to take a beat. And I think that a lot of people, we get really tunnel vision, especially those of us with, A-type personalities are very directional. And we forget that that's not a great place to be. And I think that what you're talking about is a really great reminder of why we need people who are not trying to force the world to be what they want to be, but are embracing the world as it is.
Yeah, I love that. We have this trick where we say whenever we do surveys, even if it's for adults, 3rd grade reading level, if a 3rd grader is not going to know the words, take them off. I mean, and it's just, I even think if someone asked me how much money I made, I would be like, do you mean before or after taxes and business expenses? And right? That's an easy question. How much money do you make? Except it's not. Cause I'm I actually could answer this in 4 different ways, depending on what you want me to count.
Well, so that's great segue to one of the questions we ask all of our guests, which is how do you answer when people ask you, because obviously you're in a space that is relatively, as you put, a high barrier for entry for your clients financially. You own your own business. And then on top of that, you have the temerity to be a woman doing all those things, which just sounds crazy, Kirsten. So with all of that, how do you answer when people look at you and go, yeah, but how much do you make?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I usually don't give people specific numbers, not because I don't know. At some point I'm I guess I don't really care. I usually how much did I make last year? I make 6 figures. I make 6 figures easy every year. Even after expenses, I'm still making 6 figures. But I also think people are usually asking it because they have some angle or an agenda. So it's just I make plenty. I do fine. Mm-hmm. I'm doing just fine.
My husband's answer is always, I do all right. I do all right.
I do all right. Yeah.
Which people are like, I know what your job title is. I know who your employer is. I'm looking at your house. I feel like I would like to know more about all right. And I think, so I'm not going to push further, but I totally understand. I think that was a very helpful answer. And I hope that people listening, their real interest is around is this a viable business, et cetera, et cetera. Not that we wish people to come and be competition for you, but
no, well, but I
more
also
good
think
science is good.
Oh, agreed. I don't even really believe in competition, honestly. I just think people ask all the time. It's who are your competitors? It's I don't actually think anyone's in competition with me.
No one's in my league.
Yeah.
There are other pretenders.
The more the merrier. But I think I more often get asked what I charge people. I think that's always people always want to know how much does it cost to work with you? How much I was on a call before this call where someone's I'm just getting started as a consultant. They're not in the research space, they're in a different space. They're how much do you charge? I'm man, everyone question is depends on what to do, right? It depends on what you need. But I was charge more than you think you should. That's take whatever number you think you should be asking for and double it and start there, because
so here it is. So this is one of these great, almost a religious question for people who are in consulting. I am of the very firm opinion that my rates are my rates. I don't negotiate.
Nope.
My rates are my rates. No, you can't have a discount. I'm sorry if you feel that they're expensive. If you feel that they're expensive, I wish you well in finding somebody else equally qualified who will do it for you for less. I'm not ugly about it.
Yeah.
Everybody's in a different place, but I also I don't believe in and I think that, I guess my question is, there's 2 schools of thought in consulting. There's some people who are in my camp who are the price is what the price is. There are other people who are on I'm going to ask for 40% more than what I want, and I'm going to let you talk me down to what my actual rate needed to be in the first place. What are your thoughts on the 2 schools of thought, and where does your preference lie?
I definitely like I quote people what I would charge. Like I don't play games, right? I'm like, you can pay this amount or you cannot pay this amount, but like for what you're asking, this is how much it costs.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I have, especially because I work in that social good space, there are people that I will give a discount, but it's like I have rules about it. You know what I mean? It's like not everyone gets a discount, but like one of my biggest clients had a bunch of smaller organizations that they worked with, and they were all just getting started and they had super small budgets. And I was like, you know, this has been a good client. I've worked with them for a really long time. If you're affiliated with their organization, I'll give you 30% off when you work with me. And like that was a rule I had. So it's like, okay, like you get a discount. And I have a background, my PhD was in education policy. So a lot of times schools want to work with me. Schools don't always have the budget. And I think this is when like my heartstrings, which is why I had to make rules around it. Cause I'm just like, oh, like I want to be able to help you. So there are a certain amount of projects I will take on and I will write off like 50% of it is pro bono. But it's, to me, that's like 1 to 2 hours of my time. You know what I mean? It's not like, here's a month-long, 2-month-long, 3-month-long project at 50%. It's like, no. Like if you want to talk to me for an hour, instead of charging you the $800 I would charge everyone else, I'll charge you $400 because you're doing good work. But like, that's 1 hour, not, you know, months and months.
I totally feel that, because obviously working in my space, right? Like people who are out of work inevitably don't ask for help until they are at the end of their savings. And if they don't get a job now, they're going to lose their, like it's emotional and it's scary and they don't have money, and my heart breaks for them, but my children still like food.
Yeah.
And so it's like finding this balance of like, how can I support people and not be a dick, and be able to be the supportive, kind person in a really freaking tough time that I want to be. And at the same time, pay my stuff, feed my children, you know, those types of things. So yeah, I 1,000% feel you on that. So when you were beginning your professional journey, after you got done playing in education forever, you abandoned the ivory tower and came to slum with the rest of us in the working world. What made you, there are huge hyperglobal megacorps that design research studies, et cetera. What made you to say, that's not where I want to go. I want to work for me. Why did you choose that?
I think if I were to, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, if I was to think about like my biggest weakness, it's like, I'm so values driven and like so committed to what I believe in that it's kind of like to hell with anything else. So for me, it's like, it's hard to attach yourself to those big firms when you can't you could oppose a decision, but like you're going to get steamrolled into doing it anyways. And like, I actually, as a human, can't do it. So I would just be like, okay, I quit. Right. Like I'm done. And I like as a consultant had a client once where we were like wrapping up a project, and at the last minute, they decided to do something with the data I didn't agree with, but I emailed them and I'm like, if you proceed to do this, like that's your choice. Please take my name off the project. Sincerely, Kirsten. Like, I'm just like, if I don't agree with what you're doing, I will not be a part of it. And that to me meant you cannot join up with an existing firm, because I didn't agree with their approach to research. You see them like churning out these big studies for tons of money and creating like basically nothing that useful to anyone who's not working on a graduate degree or at a university. And I think that's changed a little bit, but still I know so many people who work in that space, and I'm like, God, but like when someone makes a decision you don't agree with, you just have to do it. Like that sucks. I'm not going to do that.
All right. Officially, we can't be best friends because I already have one of those, but we can be almost best friends now because I completely and totally agree with you. And it is a constant struggle. And we were chatting before we started recording that I am notoriously extremely honest. So much so that like the lower right-hand part of my face twitches and spasms if I try to lie, which apparently was true my whole life. And my mom didn't tell me until I was graduating from university. And I said something and she just started pissing herself laughing. And I said, well, what is so funny? And she goes, Michelle, you should probably know when you lie. your face twitches. So you should probably stop. We've always known when you were lying to us. And I was like, and so I just decided to like own it and lean in. Right. So I always tell the truth. And that has professionally been problematic. Because when they say, hey, what do you think of this? I tell them. And organizations don't always really want to know the answer. And I get frustrated with clients because almost every organization will say, we want people who will tell us the truth and be innovative and have ideas. I'm like, no, you don't. You want people who are going to show up, shut up, and do what you told them to do, while like the 5 white guys in charge make all the actual decisions. Yeah, like 100%. That's what you want. And that's okay. Some people are down for that. I am not that girl. So you should just be honest. Yeah. That being what you're looking for so that you quit hiring the wrong people. So yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now I like you even more. I'm even more excited. So we've talked about why companies suck and why you're awesome. Yes. When you say you work with do-gooder and socially conscious organizations, what does that mean to you? Like, what constitutes doing good? I mean, is it along political lines for you? Is it what? Yeah, I'd say it's probably, especially like I have some international clients, but like, especially in the US, I think I would be probably pretty hard pressed. I'm very liberal. I've never worked for a super conservative organization. I imagine I would just say no, honestly, unless I was trying to come up with an example the other day, because they were like, who do you not work with? And I was like, I guess I tend not to work with like really religious organizations. And I was like, but I guess if there was like a church that was like starting a soup kitchen and they wanted to evaluate the impact, I would work with them because they're starting a soup kitchen and like that's doing good. They're not like trying to convert everyone to whatever they believe in. Like then I'd be like, no. But I'd say it's definitely, I think there are some like key social issues, and when people are passionate about making them better so that things are more equitable and like more people are brought to the table and like everyone's rights are increased and people's basic needs are met, I'm like, that's social good. Like if you're starting to be like exclusionary and be like, oh, but like not those people, or like, you know, like I think some people don't want to bring everyone to the table, and I'm very much like, everyone can come, like let's all like work together. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And if people aren't on board with that, I can't, right? I think I think over the past year, especially, companies are much louder or quieter, noticeably so, about what they value. And to me, I'm like, if you've come out against like gay rights or women's rights, or like your policy on racism and equity isn't good, it's like, I can't work with you. Like we're just at a stage where it's like, I don't stand for that. So like, I can't be a part of it. It's great that you have a clean water initiative, but you're gonna have to work on some other things first. And I'm not down. No, I have said it before and I will say it again. If our organization screaming Black Lives Matter offends you and you don't want to give me your money, I don't give a shit. Like there's just not enough. There's just too much going on to ignore it. But so my business partners and I are all definitively in the left camp. I am probably I'm definitively the furthest right of any of us. So like I am very fiscally conservative, but extremely socially liberal. Whereas one of my business partners is definitely in the eat the rich thought, which is why she does not get to do business development for sure. But it's hard. And so when we talk about partnerships with organizations, when we talk about who do we work with, where do we advertise, who do we give our money to, like we go through kind of like a moral vetting of all of those people to make sure that like we're not going to endorse anything or be part of anything that is not where we want to be. Talk to me. It sounds like you have a similar process. Like, what level of vetting do you do? Like if Coca-Cola comes to you and says, Kirsten, I've got all the money, let's do a study. And you're like, you make kids fat and you're a really bad polluter. I feel like go to hell. I mean, where's the line?
I feel like I have a good example of this because I worked with a client and we got some funding from the Koch brothers from the Koch brothers. And I got to tell you, there was like no strings attached. They were like, here's a couple $1 million, go do some good work. And I did not feel bad at all taking that money. And there were a ton of people in the organization who were like, we can't accept this. This is the Koch brothers. Like they're terrible, like polarizing people. Right. And I think I host a podcast called Graceful Rule Breakers. And one of the spaces I like to operate in is like kind of on like the danger line, right? I'm like, there are people with money and power who I disagree with on a bunch of stuff. I will, if there are no strings attached and you're not telling me like how to use it or like what I have to believe in to get it, I will gladly take your money and do some stuff with it that like you would maybe rather me not do with it, right? Like, I think that there's so few people hold the money and power that if it like trickles down to the point where you're an organization that's actually like exceedingly like pro-Black, pro-LGBTQ, and you're going to get millions of dollars to move that mission forward, it's like, take it. Don't feel bad about it. If you were going to take it and go do some like radical right agenda with it, like I would like to have nothing to do with that. But I think a lot of times the money is coming from people in those types of organizations. And I think that one of the things I learned, not by choice, but that I was very grateful for when I was forced to go to all these meetings with like Teach for America, which is super polarizing in education. And I like hated Teach for America. And we had to go meet with like Teach for America and all these Wall Street corporations when I was at Penn. And I was just like, I hate everyone in the room. And I was like such a jerk about it. Right. And then you're like forced to sit in this room and meet people. And I'm like, they're actual humans. Like, whoa, these are like people. I had no idea that you all had like souls and like families and like actually want to make things better. And then I'm like, but are so severely misguided on your path. And it's been nice to be able, I think, to hold the tension of like, I'd like seeing the good in people. Like some people are trying to do good and just don't know what they're doing. And like they have resources and I'm like, okay, like we can work together. And I think there's other people you talk to them and you're like, you just have a bad feeling. You're like, I think this is trouble. Like, I think you are up to no good and believe horrible things. And like, I can't associate with you.
So to problematize that, right? We use the recent example. I'm sure you heard about the big anti-vax coalition that paid for the big study that to prove definitively that vaccines cause autism, which they knew in their hearts and souls all along. And then they hired like a real research group, so it was not the bad science from previous. And lo and behold, very definitively proved vaccines have no causal relationship with Alzheimer's, with not either, but vaccines have no causal relationship with being on the autism spectrum. And now they are suing the research company because I don't know what. I think though that a lot of good came out of that, right? That if no credible researcher had been willing to take that money, we wouldn't have that dialogue, right? That like that shook the anti-vax community, which to me is obviously people who are crazy. But again, surprisingly, there are people in that community that are human beings that are more complicated than just being crazy or stupid, which is, you know, their taglines for the rest of us, right? So how do you feel about that, about being the person who goes in and like you elicit change because you prove their crazy agenda is not a thing?
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about being a researcher is that you really like, you get to be like, you're independent, and it's like, you don't like people who know what they want to find. It's like, you're not a good researcher. Like you really have to be able to approach it as like, whatever the data says is whatever the data says. And so I think in some cases, like there are certain studies that I wouldn't be part of because I know my personal biases would like color my judgment as a researcher. Like I probably wouldn't be good to work on some vaccination thing because I'd be like, well, I really want to prove that they work. And the thing is, it's like, I firmly believe this, like you can find research to prove literally anything. You can find research to prove both sides of anything, right? So it's just kind of like, I think you have to be so aware of your biases going in and being really like, I'm actually just curious. Let's learn. And like, however it turns out, like, doesn't matter to me. I'm just here to show you what I learned.
I think that is such a smart point. I think that like going with that there is, if you have an agenda, you can insert that into 1,000 different ways. And it's why it is so important to be able to ask smart questions about the data that you're looking at, to be able to know for sure that this is real, that it's not just some super biased survey that somebody did one time and sent to 100 people. And like that it's quality data. If you were going to pick like 3 things that were the hallmarks of quality data to help educate people who maybe listen to Fox News or other non-credible informational sources out there, what would your points be for what to look for really good data?
Oh, I love this question. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about. I always want people to look at like the sample or like the people they got the information from, because I think this is like the biggest source of bias and like anything is it'll be like 85% of people think this idea is really great, and then you look and it's like, who did they talk to? And it's like, oh, that's interesting, like they only talked to their friends. Or like in education it happens a lot where it's like, this reading program will solve all of our problems. And I'm like, cool, like where did they test the reading program? And it's like in a white upper middle class suburb in Connecticut. And I'm like, well, what the heck? Like if you're not working in that, like research is so contextual that like really looking at like, okay, but where did your data come from? Like how many people, like what was like the diversity of the population? What country was it in? What city was it in? Like all that really matters.
And did no one ever ask a pool of 1,000 Fox News watchers what they felt about Trump? And then surprisingly, he came up with this ridiculously high, and you know, the corollary as well, right? So like, you know, did you ask a bunch of New York Times readers what they thought? Like obviously your data pool is skewed. So great. So it's like, understand the data pool to begin with. And then what else? Because sometimes that can be hard to find. Like,
well, it's all, I feel like it's all hard to find, which drives me crazy, because it's just like, it's, to me, my sister and I have talked about this. This is something I would love to launch. And it's like a recipe label for when you report stats. And like, anytime you report a fact, you actually have to tell me, like, who did you ask? Like baseline, you got to tell me who you asked. And it should just be stamped on everything. Cause it's like, I want to know your sample.
The geek girl in me is just like, I am so excited at that very idea. That is holy cow. I love that. I love that. Just like a nutritional information.
Yeah, right. Like tell me some basic facts about where this came from.
Like, does it have ribosine? What was your your pool size? Was it double blind? Did you did you have a control group? Oh my God.
Right? Because that really shouldn't be that hard to find, because you can't make an educated decision about whether or not it's good data if you don't know those things. So it's like, why is that? The New York Times is actually like a huge offender of this, I feel like, because they'll print like a recent report by McKinsey. I love picking on McKinsey and Company because they would like never hire me because I'm too like just out there, but they get to do all these like cool studies in education and like never even have real researchers, not never, rarely have real researchers on the team. But New York Times will like, McKinsey can co-report, like found this, this, and this. But it's like, they don't report the sample. They don't say like how McKinsey did the study. So then I'll be the nerd who goes and like digs up the McKinsey study and calling people. I'm like, nah, they just talked to like 100 leaders of like education organizations. Like who, like that's not even who I would talk to answer this question, right? Yeah. And but it's so buried. So it really is like, I feel for people. I'm like, I get that you hear this and think that like, because it's a number, it must be true. But if you don't know where that number came from, or to your point, like what questions did you ask to like get that number? Like, I actually am like, show me the instrument. I want to see the 10 questions you asked people to like get to that. But like, that's hard to find too. And it's just like, how are we supposed to make educated decisions?
Absolutely. And I think that like people make fun of Fox News watchers and the whole fake news thing, but actually, if I put my political preferences aside, I would have to admit that actually everybody uses fake news, that I get really frustrated that statistics and research have become agenda tools of everybody. So the right and the left have their independent research teams that, as you said a minute ago, like they come back with exactly the findings that they wanted to have, like when they went in, right? And then they present it all as gospel. I saw something the other day on SHRM, which you would think like SHRM, human resources, not uber political and agenda. There was a like pro against thing about working from home, and there were two experts that each had studies that had exactly opposite findings, that they were like hanging their hat on, right? Like 90% of people who work from home say that they would really rather work in a collaborative environment in an office. And the other one's like 90% of people who work from home say that they hate people and always want to work from home. Like almost verbatim the opposite. And it drove me nuts in particular because this article went out and there was nothing that acknowledged that. Like if I was curating that, I wouldn't have been able to do it, honestly, Kirsten, because I'd have been like, check this crazy shit out, y'all. Right. And then I would have needed to put links. I would have gone back to these supposed experts and been like, we have two experts that are throwing around numbers that are completely opposite. I'm going to need to check everybody's data. And then when I find out that you've both made this shit up, now I'm just going to go find somebody else who doesn't tell lies.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. And it's so frustrating.
I think like to me, like the answer to everything is like, we don't know. That's always, it's like, there's just no definitive answer. So when someone's like, this is 100% absolutely the truth, I'm like, that's BS. Like, you don't know. None of us know. And like, I love whenever researchers like put a lot of like caveats around their answers. Like, I think it drives like general public wild. And I'm like, way to be responsible. You should put those in. Be like, absolutely. Here's what we learned, except like note these 5 things that like totally could have like explained these results. And I'm like, yeah, like that's the right way to report information. But I can imagine like for leaders of organizations or like political leaders, it's like, that's annoying. Cause like, I just want you to tell me what to do. And it's like research,
it's not like, very emotionally satisfying. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody wants that, right? Everybody. My whole job at this point in my life is telling people what to do so that other people can then tell them what to do. Like, essentially, that's what I do, right? Like, you listen to me, then you can get a job where somebody else will make you listen to them. And even still, I desperately would love stats, studies, all the research that told me exactly the right answer, that told me that took away the ambiguity and just simplified. And that doesn't exist, No. And I think that's just a hard thing to sit with, especially in business where money and lives and keeping the doors open are all on the line with some of it. Yeah.
And I feel like I mean, I'm just like, I'm a weirdo. So like, I think I balance out my researcher side with like, I'm like super into personal development. I'm like really into like a ton of like hippie things. And I really like to balance out research with like intuition, because I'm like, here's the thing, like at the end of the day, you need to like make a decision and you need to like accept responsibility with it and like move forward. And like 100% chance the data is not going to tell you exactly what you need to know. So like you need to like work on some other like personal confidence, tuning into what you really need and value and like all of those things, because otherwise you're going to be trapped. Research will never be like 100% yes, go that way. Like just no, it's not going to happen.
I mean, it often is, but only after it's been through a couple spin doctors and
yeah, exactly.
I want to back away from research and move on to Kirsten for a moment, because I do have some questions about you. And what you just said actually kind of lends to that. So one of the things that I really dig about your branding for your work and your company is you're just kind of you, and you're a girl with great boots and a cute dog, and like that's just there in the media, like in all your branding and all of that. And we live as ladies in a world that's that tells us to not be feminine, to, you know, be corporate, and that corporate is very cold and, you know, buttoned up. And you just say fuck it to that, which I'm all over. Talk to me about, like, did you just come out that way and like it's always been there and everybody can suck it, or is that like a evolution of maturity for you that you've gotten to there? And have you had any pushback around those choices?
Yeah, it's so funny because I remember being in high school and my mom was like, we need to go buy you like a blazer and like a suit. And I was just like, oh, like, why? That's like so not me. I don't want, and my mom like forced me to go to Ann Taylor and buy this like blazer and suit. And I felt so dumb in it. And I think that was the moment where I was just like, I feel stupid in this outfit. And like, I'm so uncomfortable. And I just like hated everything about it. That was like, this is not the way to show up in a room. Like, you can't show up feeling like a total like weird dork and like expect to do good work, right? So to me, I finally like come around on the blazers. Like, I'll wear a blazer with like cute boots and like, you know, but like never a pantsuit. Like, it's just, it doesn't feel good for me. Like, I can't
pantsuits. Some women wear pantsuits and they work.
Right. And they love them. But I think that's the thing. You gotta, like, if it doesn't feel good on you and you're not like strutting around like, oh, I look so cute right now, I feel like that translates into like your work and your demeanor. So I'm like, I just have to feel good about what I wear. And to me, like, yeah, I think I try so hard. I'm glad I can't successfully do this, but I'll like try to like check the boxes of like what people think you like should wear and do. And then I'm just so uncomfortable that I'm like, nah, fuck this. I gotta just like, I'm gonna wear my like cute, sexy heels and like, but I will say I got a ton of pushback. I work with a ton of men. I don't really know why or how that has happened, but I'm like constantly working with a ton of men. And when I first, even when I was in graduate school is weird because you have a job, like they're paying you to do research, but you're also in school. So it's just kind of weird. But I remember there was a guy I worked with who I wore dresses all the time in graduate school. I like pretty much never wear dresses anymore, which I'm like, maybe it's because those were like some formative years and no one took me seriously because I was always in like these like flowery pink, like really feminine dresses. And some guy was like, I always find it like so surprising that you're actually like really intellectual. And I was just like, what? That's like so offensive. I know.
Oh my God. Did you hit him? Because I would have hit him.
I was just like, thanks. Like, what?
Wow. But aren't you an asshole?
Yeah, but I spent so much of my life being like very shy and just like so quiet and just like really doing whatever I wanted to do, but like doing it quietly. Like, I didn't have to make a big deal about it. I was just like, whatever, like this guy's an idiot and like I can wear this dress if I want to. And like I'd show up the next day in like a workout clothes. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, if you're smart, you know what you're doing. Look at the tech guys. They wear sweatshirts and like Vans. I'm like, yeah, I want to be like them and just like show up and be like, I am the boss and this is what the boss wears. Right. Yeah. But I think it was definitely born more out of like the discomfort of like fitting in and just things needing to feel like me. And if people didn't like it, it's like, that's too bad. Like, I'm not going to change it.
And I mean, I think how much privilege is it from this guy, right? That he feels empowered and entitled to say that to you.
Right.
Can you imagine as a woman in business walking up to some dude after a board meeting and be like, wow, when you showed up in the suit and tie, I really thought you were going to be a douchebag, but hey, you're not too bad. Well done, my friend. Well done. Right? Like,
this is actually even better is I I had a real job for like 4 months. Cause you know, sometimes when you start a business after like 8 months of being broke, you're like, I can't do it. Let me go back. So I took a real job at a school district, and my boss there told me that he thought it was really cute that I had a PhD. And I was like, oh, it's cute. It's cute that I have a PhD. Like, oh, okay. Like, what is like this? I think being a woman, sometimes I'm just so like, and I like everywhere it was like, Miss Hill, Miss Hill, Miss Hill. And the guy across from me, they'd be like, Dr. So-and-so. And I was like, what? Like, this is just, what is this world? Right?
Yeah.
Like it's,
so for me, I got so freaking sick in the corporate world of hearing, gosh, Michelle, you're really competent, but you really need to work on being more likable. Have you thought about your likability? And my response being, have you thought about going to fuck yourself recently? Because I didn't realize you hired me to be nice, because I would have told you I was a poor candidate if that's what you were looking for. I thought you were hiring somebody to be exceedingly competent. And I think we both agree I'm an excellent person from that regard. But like over and over again. And one of like I think I told my then boyfriend, now husband, the first time I came back from a big consultation meeting when it was like very boardroomy and somebody said something douchey to me, and I turned around and I said, look, you're paying me to be an expert, not to be your friend. So if you want to keep paying me, great. And if not, I've already got your check. And like literally I was able to say it like that. And they all just sat there with their mouths hanging open. They're English, so it was a little forward, especially for them culturally. But like they just looked at me. And then like after that, I never had another problem with them. It was very much like, but it does give you license to not have to deal with that shit by being the external, like you are being hired to be an authority. You're being hired to be Dr. Kirsten and not just like the girl in the pink dress. That's really sweet. And like, I completely, I feel you 1,000%. And I think most women probably do as well.
And to me, it's just important to have I don't get defensive over it, because I was talking to my dad. My dad is a consultant also. And he gets like, he just gets more defensive, right? It's like, no, like people, like you should be mad that people aren't like treating you with like more respect. You know what I mean? And I was like, do you know what the thing is? Like when I'm in a room and people are like talking over me or like not listening to my advice, I just kind of like chill out, and I'm just like, this doesn't bother me at all, because I know that I'm better at this than all of you. Like, and that's just what's in my head. I'm just like sitting there. I'm like, you want to design a survey without me? Like, have fun. I'll be over here. When you're ready for my opinion, like you can ask me, but like, I'm not fighting you for it. Like, I feel comfortable in my knowledge.
You paid me to show up and be an expert. I paid up and showed up and was an expert. I can't make you listen. Like you paid for my time. There you go. Right? That's
just
fine.
Like, you don't want to like, who wants to have to convince people? It's like, no, like I'm important. You should listen to me. And I'm like, look, I don't have time for that. Listen to me. Don't listen to me. Like, I don't really care. That's about you.
Yeah. And I feel like that also just gives them more power, right? Like it just feeds the beast, because now like you've put more emotional energy into what is essentially their bullshit and their problem.
Yeah.
And I feel like just by showing up and not giving any fucks, I am already furthering the calls of women. Like I don't need to then also get up in their face. I do find that I behave differently if it's something about a different marginalized group that I don't represent just by showing up. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so like
totally.
If I'm in a meeting or if I'm working with a client that is doing something that is dismissive or marginalizing overtly of Black people or what have you, I'll call them on it, because for me, like that's part of my job as somebody with very pale skin.
Yeah. Well, and you're in the room, right? It's like, if you've been invited into the room, that is, to me, that's more like, that's like social justice, good morals. It's like, all right, if I'm in the room and this is happening, then like, I have to say something. But then I'm like, but if you want to like shit on me and my degree, like, I like, whatever. It's
Go
fine.
big. Yeah. I get thick skin. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I completely understand. And I think that's a great attitude. I hate that it's still a problem. You would think that in 2021, like,
yeah,
we'd be past it, but apparently not.
No.
So you talked a couple of times about your work in education, which is fantastic because God knows our education system needs some help. If I gave you a magic crayon and I made you queen of the world and I said, okay, Kirsten, you get one act, one thing with you and your magic crayon, what would you singularly do that would fix education?
Ooh. I think...
Hashtag no pressure.
Yeah, I know. Like, oh, only one thing.
Only
I feel like
one.
I'm one of those people who's like, let me like twist this so that it secretly is like 7 things wrapped into one thing.
I think you know I'd call you.
Yeah, I know. I think education would be much better if teachers got to make decisions. I would put teachers in the top decision-making positions. Like, easy. I don't know how to fix education, but I bet teachers know how to fix it because they do it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like they so infrequently get a seat at the table. And to me, it's like, y'all should be like running the show. Like, let me know how I can help you. But like, you're there doing this every day. So like, if this is the best way to like run a school or teach math, then like, that's what we should do.
My sister is a teacher. And one of the things that she complains about a lot, justifiably, is that she said probably 40% of her not standing up in front of the classroom, professional time, justifying her continued existence as a teacher. And she's like, no other profession.
No.
She's like, the number of forms and hoops and bullshit that I have to go through just to once again confirm that, yes, I am competent, I'm showing up, and I'm doing my damn job. She's like, is insulting and keeps her from being able to do 1,000 other things. And so, yeah, so you would use your magic crayon to make teachers the kings and queens of education, and then that would fix it. I think. Yeah. Not a bad answer. That's better than what I would have come up with in particular. So I probably would do something that just like is about a pet peeve of mine that probably may statistically not have been it, right? And like, no more fucking standardized tests.
Oh my God. Yeah, no. That is true. I don't disagree with that.
They are like, for everything, everybody feels bad after a standardized test. Stop doing it.
Oh my God. I used to work with all the kids who like failed the test, because like at least in New Orleans, you would get like held back if you didn't pass the standardized tests. And I would work with all the kids who like didn't do well on them. And I was just like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I'm not a great test taker. And like, I'm like, do you think I'm stupid? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, then like same, you know, like whatever. That's just stupid.
Well, and so I am not a great test taker. I am, like I said to you earlier, I'm dyslexic and I'm super dyslexic, and I was late life identified. So I went through I got accidentally identified in college because a girlfriend of mine was taking a psych course where they were learning about like the assessment tools. And she's like, I'm doing it wrong because it looks like you're dyslexic. And we went and met with the professor and they were like, you're not doing it wrong. Also, you should probably know that you're very dyslexic. But so I had like this whole like life and like academic, most of my time in academia from childhood on, I struggled with tests and reading and all that kind of stuff. And nobody had any idea. I kept being told how lazy I was because they're like, you're obviously smart. You're just very lazy. And so what I have learned is I am definitively bad at test taking. But despite that, I know that I have good coping mechanisms and I am pretty smart, which means that my test scores, even with me being bad at tests, are far above average.
Yeah.
And so I have to be really careful when I'm trying to be supportive of people saying things like I'm bad at tests, because they're like, oh, well, aren't you a dick?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm also a dick in that sense. Yeah. I'm like, I feel
only
like
got a 1400 on my SAT. Oh, I am so not smart. And they're like, bitch, shut up.
That same camp. Because my parents were like, you did great on test scores. I'm like, I just like, but I also would like cry over getting like an A and not an A plus. So that's just
I was never that
I
girl.
am.
I was way less engaged.
My dad offered to pay me to not get A's in high school. He's like, we'll give you like $50 for every like B, C, D that you get. And I was just like, no, thanks. I'm trying to get like 100% on everything, Dad.
My parents were the like 1980s poor white version of Tiger parents. So that would never have been a thing in my house. Even like, a little bit.
They were like, you work too hard. But it's like, it changed. So like my brother, they wanted to pay him to get better grades. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Was he a slacker?
What?
Let's be fair, Kirsten. Was he a slacker?
Yeah. I just remember the story of him. He would be like, I was bringing it to school and it just flew out of my backpack. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you so much. Things would happen.
Our family favorite story of my brother in academia was the year that he failed. I think it was 6th grade English, failed it because he refused to do a reading writing journal. Do you remember these from school where like you read a thing and then you said like what you thought about that? And like he did the journal, but he refused to turn it in. And when we said, why didn't you turn it in? He was like, because it was none of her business what I thought about it.
I love that.
It was like, those are personal thoughts about a thing that I read. And that is not, I did what she wanted. If she wants to see it, great, but she's not allowed to.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah. We did not love the failing of English part, but we all appreciated the sentiment. Yeah.
I struggled in my speech class because you were supposed to write out what you were going to say before you presented to class. And I don't actually like preparing to speak. So I would like give a speech and then be like trying to like write down what I had just said to turn it in. And like, I was just like, school has a lot of rules.
Yeah. I did competitive speech and debate, which is how I got away with Blue Murder in high school because I was really very good. And so like, you know, in my high school, God love them, we had like, I'm from Texas, I live in Texas and have done, and so sports are like religion. And we had both like the worst loss in the history of the state of Texas for football and the longest losing streak on the record. So the only thing that we ever won as a high school was me and my partner winning in debate. And we won like big, like we won state, we won national stuff. Like we were like, so the result was that like nobody wanted to put me in a position to not be able to compete. So I'd be like, I'm not going to do physics class today. It's a debate thing. And then I would just like walk out and go do whatever. I had the worst attitude, Kirsten. You have no idea. I was like, big. Like if any of my former teachers listen to this, I apologize profusely for all of my adolescence. But that was how I got away with it. So like speech and debate was like the one place that like, yeah. And like my wonderful and delightful teacher, whom I was completely disrespectful to, would be like, you should write things down. I was like, I just fucking won the tournament last weekend by not writing things down. I think we're gonna go with my model. Good here.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
It's hilarious in retrospect. Now as a mom, I'm like, oh, I see what's coming my way.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
All right. We have digressed profoundly and we're almost out of time. So before we go, what have we not talked about that you really wanted to talk about?
Oh man. This has been great. I feel like I could just talk for like hours, you know. I'm just like,
I tell you, we're friends now, Kirsten. So,
yeah, yes. I love it.
And we both love Angela Duckworth as well. So I feel like that's a bond. Angie, if you're listening, we should be best friends.
You should just put that in like every episode because then eventually, you know, like
Dear Angela Duckworth. I feel like my husband's company sent out this. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. But I think you'll appreciate this. So my husband's company sent everybody this like, it's a new year. It's going to suck less like love and kisses box to everybody that was director level and above.
Oh, that's kind of nice.
And it had like had a little like hot chocolate bomb and a blanket for snuggling and a scented candle.
Oh my God.
And one of the things that was in there was grit. And I was like, oh, and I got so excited. I was like dancing around with this book. And my husband was like, what is happening right now? I was like, shut your face. You should know what this is.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's amazing.
Anyway.
Oh, I love it. That's what a nice company. See, like, that's nice.
Oh, they're not that nice, honey. They're EY.
Oh, my brother works for EY.
We should definitely talk offline about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, they're very nice sometimes, but also not a little bit evil. Like they're definitely one of those morally questionable organizations.
Yeah. There's always, it's nice to talk to people who know consulting firms, because I'll be like, like McKinsey, EY, BCG, like and then people are just like, I don't know any of them. And I'm like, how, like, really? I feel like they're like emblazed in my like mind.
I would agree.
Yeah.
So we're going to have links to your company, and we're also going to have links to your fabulous podcast for people to listen to that as well. Do you have any parting thoughts or words of wisdom for folks before we sign off?
Yeah. I would just, encourage, well, I'd say like if people want to go into this space, like if people want to go into research, I would say like really work on honing your like moral compass and values. Like, I think that's the key to good research, is like really, really knowing yourself and being able to like advocate for what you believe in and stand up for like asking lots and lots of questions to figure out things. And if you're not satisfied with not knowing an answer, research is probably not, you would think research will get you all the answers, but it will not. So if you can't handle with like not having a definitive answer, don't do it. You'll hate it.
All it will do is highlight how very little you know.
Yes, it really, there's some meme about like you go to graduate school to realize that like you literally like know nothing about the one thing that you've like dedicated your whole life to. And I'm like, it's kind of like, it's just becoming more comfortable with the fact that you know nothing. Like now people ask me something, I'm like, yeah, I don't know anything about that. And I feel fine. I'm like, I'm cool. I know nothing about that. Like you should ask this other human.
Yeah. I think it all like, so I think that's a great thing to end on is, the Socrates quote, I am wise enough to know I know nothing at all.
Yes. Which, I love it.
Gotta love Socrates. Classic.
Oh my God.
Can't get any more classic.
I love it. I was a philosophy major, so I'm like,
oh my God.
Such a nerd.
Girl, we're definitely friends now. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And this has been Hey, I Want Your Job. You've been listening to Hey, I Want Your Job. For more information on how you can get your own awesome job, visit ONH Consulting at www.onhconsulting.com. We offer incredible resumes, no-nonsense career advice, and real-world tips for landing a job in today's market. Check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta for more insider information. Soon, you'll be hearing us say, I'm Michelle Olivier, and hey, I want your job.